There is something rotting in your kitchen right now that a $200 billion industry has spent decades making sure you throw away. No chemicals, no NPK ratios, no $40 bags of synthetic powder with a smiling tomato on the label. Just ordinary kitchen waste that ancient farmers used to pull harvests so large that modern agronomists still cannot fully explain the yields. Your grandmother's compost pile was not primitive gardening. It was a suppressed agricultural weapon that fed entire civilizations for thousands of years before a single bag of Miracle-Gro ever existed. And the science behind why it works will permanently change how you feed every plant you will ever grow. Stay with me. Because what a Japanese scientist accidentally stumbled upon in a dying forest in the 1960s, and what the USDA quietly documented and then buried in 1940, tells a story that the fertilizer industry has spent billions of dollars making sure never reaches your garden. This is the story of the oldest growing method on Earth, and how a $200 billion industry made you forget it ever existed. The year is 2500 BC, deep inside what will one day become the Amazon basin of Brazil, in a region of South America where the soil should by all scientific logic be completely incapable of sustaining large-scale agriculture. Tropical rainforest soil is notoriously poor. Heavy rains leach nutrients downward constantly. The dense canopy above blocks sunlight. Every modern agronomist will tell you that farming the Amazon at scale is essentially impossible without massive chemical intervention. And yet, scattered across thousands of square kilometers of this supposedly impossible landscape, ancient farmers are producing food harvests so abundant, so consistently reliable, that they are sustaining some of the densest population centers in the pre-Columbian world. Their secret is not a chemical. It is not a technology. It is not even a technique in the modern sense of the word. It is black earth. Soil so dark it looks almost painted, so rich it smells alive from meters away. Built deliberately and systematically from kitchen scraps, agricultural waste, wood ash, fish bones, and the organic refuse of daily human life, layered and fermented back into the ground over generations with a patience and understanding that modern science is only now beginning to truly appreciate. The indigenous people of the Amazon called it Terra Preta, dark earth, and they did not discover it by accident or stumble upon it through trial and error. They engineered it. Modern researchers excavating archaeological sites across Brazil have found patches of Terra Preta stretching across areas larger than some European countries. Some deposits run 6 feet deep. Carbon dating places the oldest samples at over 7,000 years old. Here is the number that should stop you completely. Soil scientists testing Terra Preta plots today, in 2024, on land that has received zero human intervention for centuries, are recording yields that are 300% higher than the surrounding natural soil, 300% higher, from soil built entirely out of what you throw in your trash can every single morning. The fertility those ancient farmers created from kitchen scraps did not last a season. It did not last a decade. It outlasted their entire civilization by thousands of years, and it is still working today. Across the Pacific Ocean, separated from the Amazon by the entire width of the world, Chinese farmers in the 1st century BC are feeding the densest population concentration on Earth. China in antiquity is not a nation of abundance. It is a nation of pressure. Too many people. Too little arable land. Soil that has been farmed continuously for so long that by all rights it should be exhausted and dead. And yet Chinese agricultural productivity during this period is so extraordinary that when Marco Polo travels through China in the 13th century AD, he spends pages of his journals in documented astonishment, trying to describe harvests that his European readers will simply not believe. The system Chinese farmers use has no branded name, no patented formula, no proprietary blend. They return everything to the soil. Every kitchen scrap, every vegetable peel, every piece of organic waste from the household is collected, composted with deliberate precision, and fed back into the earth that grew it. The Chinese agricultural treatise Min Yao Shu, written around 535 AD, documents composting techniques of such sophistication that 20th century agricultural researchers reading it for the first time described it as, and I am using their words directly, more advanced than anything being practiced in mainstream Western agriculture at the time of its rediscovery. Written in 535 AD, more advanced than 20th century Western practice. European farmers during the same medieval period were watching their soil die beneath them, watching harvests shrink generation by generation, watching their populations tip repeatedly into famine. And the solution was sitting in their kitchen waste bins the entire time. The Romans understood this too, though they came to it through a different path. Roman agricultural writer Columella, writing in the 1st century AD, dedicates entire chapters of his 12-volume masterwork De Re Rustica to the specific science of organic waste application. He documents with meticulous detail exactly which kitchen scraps produce, which results in which soil types. Fish waste for nitrogen, wood ash for potassium and pH correction, legume residue for nitrogen fixation, kitchen vegetable scraps fermented in water and applied as liquid feed. Roman estate farms applying these methods are producing yields that historians calculating the numbers today estimate would not be matched or exceeded until the introduction of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers in the 20th century, 2,000 years before Miracle-Gro, 2,000 years before a single bag of synthetic NPK blend. Roman farmers were hitting yields that the modern fertilizer industry exists to replicate, and they were doing it with what came out of their kitchens. And then thousands of miles north of Rome, across an ocean the Romans never crossed, Native American farmers in the northeastern woodlands are growing the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, in mounded plots that European settlers arriving in the 17th century describe with barely disguised bewilderment. The yields from these plots, documented by early colonial writers who had absolutely no reason to exaggerate in the other direction, are described as exceeding anything the settlers had seen on comparable land in Europe. The system uses companion planting, yes, but the foundation is organic waste cycling. Kitchen scraps, fish heads, wood ash, all return to the mounds in a closed loop that keeps the soil biologically alive and chemically abundant year after relentless year. 4 civilizations, 4 continents, 0 contact between them, every single one independently arriving at the same answer. Not because it was folklore, not because it was tradition for tradition's sake, because the biology of soil is not a matter of opinion, and 100,000 years of human agricultural experiment had already run the trial that the fertilizer industry spent billions trying to make you think had never been conducted. Now stay with me, because this is where the story breaks into the modern era, and where a single man with a bag of microbes standing in a dying forest changes everything. The year is 1968, Okinawa, Japan. A young microbiologist named Dr. Teruo Haiga is working at the University of the Ryukyus, conducting research on soil microorganisms. One afternoon, he carries a collection of mixed microbial cultures outside to dispose of them on a hillside behind his laboratory. He empties the container. He walks back inside. He thinks nothing more of it. 3 weeks later, he notices something. The patch of hillside where he disposed of those microorganisms is growing with a density and a color and a vitality that is visibly, dramatically different from every square meter of ground surrounding it. He goes closer. The soil is darker, looser, richer smelling. The plants growing in it are bigger, greener, and more vigorous than anything else on that hillside. Higa spends the next 15 years trying to understand exactly what happened. What he discovers becomes one of the most important and most deliberately overlooked contributions to agricultural science in the 20th century. The microbial mixture he had dumped contained what he would eventually call effective microorganisms, specific families of bacteria, yeasts, and phototrophic organisms that, when introduced into soil in the right combinations, do something that no synthetic fertilizer on Earth can replicate. They bring the soil back to life, not metaphorically, literally, biologically. At the microbial level, where all real fertility begins and ends, Higa publishes his findings, the scientific community acknowledges the research, and then the agricultural industry, the industry built on selling you something these microorganisms make unnecessary, ensures that his work never reaches mainstream gardening culture in the Western world. 20 years earlier, across the world in Britain, a man named Sir Albert Howard had already tried to deliver the same message and met the same wall. Howard had spent decades in India studying traditional composting methods. In 1940, he published a book called An Agricultural Testament, presenting the results of controlled research showing that organic, matter-based soil management matched or exceeded synthetic fertilizer yields while building permanent, self-sustaining fertility. He presented his findings to the British government. The report was acknowledged, filed, and quietly shelved. The Second World War had just ended. Synthetic nitrogen plants built to manufacture explosives needed a new commercial purpose. The fertilizer industry was being born. And a report showing that kitchen scraps and organic waste made the entire enterprise unnecessary was not a document that needed wide distribution. That report sat in archives for 6 decades. The fertilizer industry got its wide distribution instead. Now let me show you what is actually happening in your soil when kitchen waste meets earth. Because this is not folklore. This is peer-reviewed, independently replicated soil biology that any university laboratory can verify. Healthy agricultural soil is not dirt. It is an ecosystem of almost incomprehensible biological complexity. One single teaspoon of genuinely healthy, living soil contains more individual microorganisms than the entire human population of Earth. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all existing in a web of biological relationships so intricate that science has so far only managed to identify and name a fraction of the species involved. These organisms are not passive. They are your plant's actual feeding system. Plant roots do not absorb most nutrients directly from soil particles. They cannot. The chemical bonds holding phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and dozens of trace minerals to soil particles are too strong for root chemistry to break alone. What plant roots do is feed the microorganisms living in the thin layer of soil immediately surrounding them, a zone called the rhizosphere. And those microorganisms, fed and sustained, produce the specific enzymes and acids that unlock the mineral bonds in surrounding soil particles and deliver nutrients to the root in plant-available form. Remove the microorganisms, and you remove the feeding system entirely. The plant starves not because the soil has no nutrients, but because the biological machinery that delivers those nutrients has been destroyed. Here is what synthetic fertilizers do to that machinery. A study published in the journal Applied Soil Ecology found that repeated synthetic fertilizer application reduces soil microbial biomass by between 32 and 79%, depending on the specific product and application rate. Between 32 and 79% of your soil's biological feeding infrastructure destroyed. And here's the part that should make every gardener furious. Once you destroy that biology, the plants that survive become entirely dependent on the external chemical inputs you use to destroy it. The soil is now chemically addicted. Stop the synthetic fertilizer, and yields collapse immediately, because the biological system that once sustained fertility without any external input no longer exists. You have converted a self-sustaining ecosystem into a dependency. And the company that sold you the product that created the dependency is the same company selling you the product that temporarily fills it. That is not agriculture. That is a subscription model built into your soil. Now here is what fermented kitchen waste does instead. When organic kitchen scraps are broken down through composting or fermentation, they produce three things that no synthetic fertilizer on Earth can manufacture in a bag. First, humic acid, the compound responsible for the dark color of fertile soil. Humic acid does not feed plants directly. It does something more important. It restructures soil particle aggregation, creating the loose, porous, water-retaining texture that plant roots require to penetrate deeply and access nutrients efficiently. Synthetic fertilizers produce zero humic acid. They cannot. It is a biological product and it requires biological processes to create. Second, living microbial populations. Every cup of actively fermenting kitchen waste contains billions of lactic acid bacteria, yeasts, actinomycetes, and phototrophic bacteria. Applied to soil, these populations restore and amplify the biological feeding infrastructure that synthetic fertilizers destroy. The Rodale Institute's Farming Systems trial, running continuously for over 40 years and representing the longest-running side-by-side comparison of organic and synthetic growing methods in scientific history, documented organic matter-managed plots matching synthetic fertilizer yields in normal conditions and outperforming them by up to 40% during drought years. 40% better performance during drought, because living soil built from organic matter holds water and dead chemically managed soil cannot. Third, chelated mineral availability. As organic matter decomposes, it produces organic acids that chelate, meaning chemically bind to, soil minerals in a form that plant roots can absorb directly without microbial intermediaries. Phosphorus locked in soil particles that synthetic phosphorus fertilizer cannot reach becomes plant available. Iron, manganese, zinc, and copper, micronutrients that commercial fertilizers rarely even include, become accessible. The soil you already have becomes exponentially more productive without adding a single purchased input. Now let me give you the specific numbers on what is sitting in your kitchen trash right now. A single banana peel contains between 3.25 and 4.87% potassium by dry weight. Commercial potassium fertilizer, potassium sulfate, contains 50% potassium by weight and costs $18 per pound at retail. The potassium in a banana peel is not as concentrated, but it is chelated, meaning plant available immediately upon decomposition, while synthetic potassium requires soil moisture and microbial activity to become accessible anyway. You are going to throw that banana peel away. Coffee grounds run between 1.45 and 2.1% nitrogen by dry weight, comparable to many mid-grade commercial nitrogen supplements. They also contain significant phosphorus, potassium, copper, and magnesium. And the spent grounds from your morning coffee are already partially broken down by the brewing process, meaning they begin releasing nutrients to soil within days rather than weeks. You are going to throw those away too. Eggshells are 93% calcium carbonate. Commercial calcium fertilizers for gardens cost between $12 and $30 per bag. Calcium deficiency causes blossom end rot in tomatoes, tip burn in lettuce, and bitter pit in apples. A dozen eggs generates enough calcium carbonate, dried and crushed, to treat several square feet of calcium-deficient soil. They were in your trash this morning. Wood ash from a fireplace or fire pit contains between 3 and 7% potassium oxide and between 20 and 35% calcium carbonate, along with measurable phosphorus and a full spectrum of trace minerals. A commercial soil amendment with an equivalent mineral profile would cost $15 to $25 per application. Wood ash is a byproduct of burning wood that most people dispose of without a second thought. The fertilizer industry did not bury this knowledge because it does not work. They buried it because it works so thoroughly and so cheaply that it removes the customer from the purchasing cycle entirely. Let me show you exactly how large that purchasing cycle is, because these numbers matter. The global fertilizer market is valued at $197 billion annually as of 2024. It is projected to reach $263 billion by 2030. The companies that dominate this market, Nutrien, Mosaic Company, Yara International, and CF Industries, collectively spend tens of millions of dollars per year on government lobbying, university research funding, and agricultural extension service influence, not to improve your soil, to protect a market. Here is how the protection works. And pay close attention because this is more sophisticated than an outright ban. Agricultural universities in the United States receive substantial funding from synthetic fertilizer manufacturers. A 2019 investigation by the Food and Environment Reporting Network documented millions of dollars flowing from fertilizer and agrochemical companies into university research departments that shape the recommendations given to farmers and home gardeners by agricultural extension services across every state. Those extension services, the county agricultural advisors that home gardeners and small farmers trust as neutral government resources, are trained almost exclusively on synthetic input methods. Composting and organic waste recycling are presented as supplementary at best, insufficient at worst. The word they use most often is insufficient, not ineffective, not unscientific, insufficient. A carefully chosen word that acknowledges the method works while simultaneously dismissing it as not serious enough for real growing. Meanwhile, kitchen waste composting cannot be standardized into a bag with an NPK label. It cannot be patented. It cannot be certified by industry-influenced certification bodies. It cannot generate a recurring purchase cycle. It cannot be sold on subscription. And in a market worth $197 billion a year, a method that costs nothing and works better is not a competitor. It is an existential threat. In 2012, a meta-analysis published in the journal Nature examined 66 studies comparing organic farming methods to conventional synthetic fertilizer methods across multiple crop types and growing conditions. The findings showed that organic methods achieved an average of 80% of conventional yields, while simultaneously building soil health, reducing input costs, and improving long-term productivity trajectory. 80% with zero purchased inputs versus 100% with $200 worth of seasonal fertilizer costs. The financial math is not complicated. But the study received almost no coverage in mainstream agricultural media. You know who funds the advertising budget. Now, I want to be honest with you the way this topic deserves honesty. Fermented kitchen waste and organic composting are not perfect solutions for every situation. In the first season of converting chemically damaged soil, yields may not immediately match what synthetic fertilizers produce. The biological system needs time to rebuild, 6 months to 2 years depending on how severely the soil biology has been depleted. For container gardening with commercial potting mix that has no existing soil biology, the fermentation liquid applications work faster than solid composting and bridge the gap effectively. And for large-scale commercial agriculture under current economic pressures, a full organic transition requires planning, patience, and financial buffer that not every farmer has access to. But for home gardeners, backyard growers, raised bed growers, and anyone producing food at the scale of a household or small plot, the numbers are simply not close. Kitchen waste methods cost effectively $0 in inputs. They build permanent soil fertility that compounds year over year. They produce results that after the biological establishment period match or exceed synthetic fertilizer performance in every documented long-term trial. And they do not destroy the biological infrastructure of your soil in the process. Here is exactly what to do starting today. The first method requires nothing you do not already have. Collect your kitchen scraps for 1 week. Vegetable peels, fruit skins, coffee grounds, eggshells, tea bags emptied of their leaves, banana peels, and any soft vegetable matter. Avoid meat, dairy, and cooked food for this method. Chop or tear the scraps into pieces roughly the size of your thumbnail. Smaller surface area means faster breakdown. Place them in any container with a loose-fitting lid. A bucket, a large jar, a plastic bin. Add enough water to submerge everything. Add 1 tablespoon of unsulfured molasses. This feeds the fermentation microorganisms and accelerates the process dramatically. Stir once daily. After 48 to 72 hours at room temperature, you will see small bubbles forming. This is active fermentation. This is billions of microorganisms beginning the biological process that will ultimately feed your plants. After 5 to 7 days, strain out the solid material, dilute the liquid at a ratio of 1 part liquid to 10 parts water. Apply directly to the soil at the base of your plants once per week. Within 10 to 14 days, you will see the difference. New leaf growth, darker green in color, stems visibly thicker, new growth emerging faster than before. The solid material left after straining can be buried directly in your garden bed. 6 inches deep, away from plant stems, where it will complete its decomposition and feed the microbial community in your soil directly. Cost $0. A comparable liquid organic fertilizer from a garden center costs between $15 and $35 per bottle and delivers less microbial activity because it has been processed, packaged, and sitting on a shelf for months. The second method gives you significantly more power and takes only slightly more effort. This is the Bokashi system, developed directly from Dr. Higa's research on effective microorganisms. Purchase a Bokashi brand inoculant. This is wheat bran colonized with the specific microbial cultures Higa identified. It costs approximately $8 and a single bag lasts 4 to 6 months of regular use. Use any bucket with a tight-fitting lid. Place kitchen scraps in layers, sprinkling a small amount of Bokashi bran between each layer. Include anything from your kitchen. Unlike standard composting, the Bokashi fermentation process handles meat, dairy, cooked food, and oily scraps without odor or pest issues. Seal the bucket tightly between additions. After 2 weeks, the contents will be fully fermented. The material looks largely unchanged, but smells tangy and fermented rather than rotten. This is pre-digested organic matter in a form that soil microorganisms can convert to plant-available nutrients within days of application rather than the weeks required by raw composting. Bury the fermented material directly in your garden bed or add it to a compost pile where it will accelerate the entire decomposition cycle. The liquid that collects in the bottom of a Bokashi bucket is extraordinarily concentrated. Dilute it at 1:100 with water and apply to soil. At 130 dilution, it can be poured directly into drains where it colonizes pipe surfaces with beneficial microorganisms and eliminates odors. For a permanent soil building system, apply a 2-inch layer of finished compost or finished Bokashi material to your entire bed surface each spring. Do not dig it in. Leave it on the surface where rain and soil organisms will incorporate it naturally. Over 3 to 5 years, this approach builds humus levels so high that the soil becomes genuinely self-sustaining. Paul Gauci, a gardener in Washington state whose methods have been documented and studied by agricultural researchers, has managed his growing land this way for over 30 years without a single purchased fertilizer input. His yields, documented and filmed over multiple seasons, consistently embarrass the neighboring conventionally fertilized plots. 30 years, 0 purchased inputs, consistently superior yields. The method is not new. It is not experimental. It is not insufficiently proven. It is just insufficiently profitable for someone else to sell you. Think about the full scope of what we have covered today. 7,000 years ago, farmers in the Amazon built soil from kitchen scraps that is still producing 300% higher yields than surrounding land today. Chinese agricultural scientists documented composting techniques in 535 AD that 20th century Western researchers described as more advanced than current mainstream practice. Roman farmers produced yields from organic waste cycling that would not be matched until synthetic fertilizers arrived 2,000 years later. Native American farmers grew harvests that bewildered European colonists who had no framework to explain what they were seeing. In 1940, Sir Albert Howard handed the British government proof that organic matter management matched synthetic fertilizer yields and built permanent fertility. The report was shelved. The synthetic fertilizer industry was born from surplus wartime chemical plants. In 1968, Dr. Teruo Higa watched a dying hillside explode with growth from a discarded mixture of microorganisms and spent 15 years proving why. The Rodale Institute has run the longest continuous side-by-side comparison of organic and synthetic growing methods in scientific history for over 40 years. Organic plots match synthetic yields in normal conditions. Organic plots outperform by 40% in drought. A banana peel contains the same potassium profile as an $18 commercial supplement. Your coffee grounds carry the nitrogen of a mid-grade commercial fertilizer. Your eggshells hold the calcium that stops your tomatoes from dying on the vine. An $197 billion industry has spent decades and hundreds of millions of lobbying dollars making sure you call all of it garbage and throw it away every single morning. This knowledge did not disappear. It was waiting, in your compost bin, in your kitchen scraps, in 7,000 years of human agricultural wisdom that the most profitable chemical industry in history needed you to forget. The Aztecs knew, the Chinese knew, the Romans knew. Sir Albert Howard knew in 1940. Dr. Heiga proved it again in 1968. The Rodale Institute has been confirming it for 40 consecutive years. And now, so do you. Share this with every gardener you know, because every share keeps alive what the industry spent billions trying to bury. The next video goes deeper, and what is waiting inside it is heavier than anything we opened today.